NABN, New Africa Broadcasting Network.
But it gives me a good pleasure to introduce somebody I call my friend. Dr. Nevin, Andrew Nevin. I hang around the conversation a couple of years ago in Lagos, and this gentleman picked up the microphone and for 30 minutes, without any slides, dissected Nigerian phenomenon. So I was amazed. You know, doctors will always question people. They were trained to question, trained to trust but verify. And we're jealous, and we're really, really jealous. Physicians are trained that. So I just listened to this man, and I was like, wow. So I went to him after and said, where did you go to school? I was expecting you to be a partner. He said, no. And then where do you work? And it's PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was so impressed that somebody not born or raised in Nigeria understood and understands the fiber, the DNA of the Nigerian economy. What is going on and what's not going on, and what it takes to revolutionize. I was rather more impressed by his natural affinity to work with Nigerians. I was rather impressed by his grasp of what it takes to make the Nigerian economy move forward. His appreciation of Nigerian potential, and the fact that he yearns on how to get the factors together for Nigeria to move on. And his willingness to answer any call by any meaningful Nigerians or international people to work. I don't have to go through his degrees in Harvard and everything he's done for the government and the works. I just want to appreciate you, sir, for taking your time and to recognize and appreciate this. Dr. Nevin. Thank you.
Let me start out. I want to stand on all existing protocols, but I really want to thank the NABF for putting this on, and just for seeing so many old friends here and new friends. It's just a fantastic event. I did come a long way from Lagos. I need to put a plug in. I have a little bit of a complicated itinerary. My brother is turning 60. I'm Canadian. So I took Ethiopian Airlines from Lagos to Addis Ababa to Toronto and then flew here. But the reason I mention that is, it's just, you know, if you have never flown on Ethiopian Airlines, it's Africa's greatest airline, and it was a real pleasure to be honored again. So please, you know, supporting Africa, it's a very good way to get to Lagos. But let me start out by saying, everyone, I think, is aware, of course, of demographic change. If we look out to 30 years from now, which is not very far, I hope everyone in this room is still here at that time, there's only going to be 3 big pools of population, right? So there's going to be, let's sort of China, Japan, Korea bloc, East Asia, Indian subcontinent, and Africa. And each of those regions is going to have about 2 billion people. Now, the growth rate in population in Europe, North America, and China put together was actually negative, right? 2/3 of the growth rate in working age population at that time is occurring in Africa. Now, what is an implication of that? Well, if you have 2 billion people, and India has 2 billion people, and China and other countries nearby have 2 billion people, it is mathematically impossible for Africa to be prosperous unless we make higher value-added products. So let me explain that. If you're exporting raw materials, it's only 5 to 10% of the value of the finished goods. If you're Norway and you're a small country exporting a large amount of raw material like oil, you can be rich. It only has 5 million people, it has very high GDP, very high HDI indexes. But when you're 2 billion people, so you are 1/7 of the world's population. If you're only exporting raw materials, you're guaranteed to be poor, mathematically. So the only way Africa is going to prosper is by producing higher value-added goods.
Yes.
Now then you ask the question, well, who are we making these for? Well, I just said Europe's population is shrinking, China's population is shrinking, Japan's population is shrinking, North America's population is only increasing because we're sending Nigerians there, right? All of these other places have a flat population. So if you're going to sell more high value-added goods, to sell into these markets is not simple because there's already people selling and the market's not getting any bigger. You have to displace others. So who can Africans sell to be more prosperous? Well, Africans can sell to Africans. And our view very strongly is we're only going to be prosperous when we do that. Now I'm privileged, I have many great clients. So I'm not just an economist, I came to Nigeria to serve clients. The only reason I became the economist was because of the oil price crash, so sadly. But I have great privilege to serve Afro-Exim Bank, which is based in Cairo, but the leader of it, of course, is Nigerian. Many Nigerians work there, people from all over Africa. Every time I visit this client in Egypt, I feel immensely proud to be able to serve them. They're just a fantastic organization. But they have been the ones working for the last 4 years on this concept of driving intra-African trade. Okay? And they had a big conference in Egypt just before Christmas that I attended to, which was very exciting. And there was Nigeria Day there. And I had actually brought, I don't know why this time, I think because Ken said it was formal, I brought this, otherwise I would have worn Nigerian costume. But I was wore my Nigerian costume to that. It was just such a fantastic day. The VP came, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Commerce came. But the highlight for me was they had the cultural show at night, which, I mean, you can all imagine as Nigerians. They had the Fela Kuti show, Two-Face was there, a few other fantastic artists. I got a selfie with Two-Face. That's got the most likes on Instagram of anything. It doesn't, so it was just fantastic. The Vice President was adamant that even though we have not yet ratified the Intra-Africa Trade Agreement, that we will, there's some issues to overcome, but we will. So that was very exciting. So now you ask the question, all right, that's all fine. So what does this mean at an Africa level? So last week, AFDB put out a report that said that in 2018, Africa grew at 3.5% of GDP. Now, I don't want to be obsessed with GDP because you need inclusive growth, but GDP is a necessary but not sufficient condition for us to be more prosperous in Africa. So that sounds okay, but the problem with 3.5% GDP growth is, in fact, to keep unemployment stable in Africa, I don't mean reducing, I mean stable, requires growth rate between 4.5% and 5.5%. So when we only grow at 3.5%, we're going backwards. Now, at the same time, how did Nigeria do last year, 2018? We grew at 2% or 1.9%. What's our population growth? 2.8%. So Nigeria is getting poorer and poorer and poorer. And of course, the other big drag on the African economy is South Africa, which hardly grew at all last year. So you have the two biggest economies, or two of the three biggest economies not growing. You have lots of bright spots in terms of GDP growth, like Senegal, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Kenya, Namibia, Botswana, I think Tunisia now, Egypt. But they're being dragged down by the giants, by Nigeria and South Africa. So we're not growing fast enough, and it's getting poorer and poorer and poorer. So then the question is, how fast do we need to grow? So we were the ones that said consistently, if we're actually going to reduce unemployment, youth unemployment, and grow incomes in Nigeria, and reduce poverty, because you all know we have the most people in absolute poverty, we need to grow at 6 to 8%. And I feel a little bit bad. I don't see the governor of the CBN here, but I may get deported soon. I've been a little bit critical of the CBN. There's so many things the CBN does well. Is anyone from the CBN here at the moment? If the governor comes, I don't know if he's going to come. You can report me. I've said this before, so I'll say it again. So CBN has done many things well, but I'm a bit disappointed when they talk about the economy. They talk about a recovery. But when we got, obviously 2016 was a terrible year, a recession. But we had higher oil prices in 2017, 2018, and we still grew less than population. So it's not a recovery. When you're getting poorer and poorer and poorer, to me, it's not a recovery. And I'm disappointed that the CBA doesn't acknowledge that when it comes out on top. So, but we need to grow 6 to 8%. Okay? Now, if we need to grow 6 to 8%, how do you grow an economy? You have to invest in it. Right? You can't grow without investment. Of course, again, it's a necessary but not sufficient condition, because you could be like China and waste investment, right? So China invests almost 45% of its GDP, reinvests every year. A lot of that, I would argue, is malinvestment, and I think eventually China will have some kind of crisis. I hope not today. But I think a better example for us is in India. So the amount that's reinvested in the economy, what economists call gross capital formation, in India is about 28 to 30% of their GDP. Now we have, how much do you think we invest? We're only investing 15 to 17%. So if you're only investing 15 to 17%, you are even if you're investing exactly the right things, it's mathematically impossible to grow at more than 2%. So if we continue only investing at 15 to 17%, it's not going to work. We're going to get poorer. So we have to invest more. Now, where can this investment come from? It can come from domestic sources, which let me put aside for a moment, I'll come back to, or it can come from outside. It's not ideal to take outsiders' money, but sometimes it's necessary. But what's the group that understands Nigerian risk best and has the resources to invest in Nigeria? It's clearly the diaspora.
Yes, right.
But if you think about it, I mean, one of our speakers, I'm sorry, I know all the speakers' names, I can't remember which one said it, but it is an incredible problem for us, the Nigerian reputation, right? So then you think of going to someone who's not in Nigeria or doesn't know Nigeria well, and you need to convince them to invest in Nigeria. You think of that task. It's possible, but don't you think it would be easier if there was an organized way to convince the diaspora, who have resources, who have obviously connection, love to the country, and of course the people that aren't diaspora might be asked, well, if the diaspora is not prepared to invest, why would I be prepared to invest?
Yes.
So then let me just talk about the diaspora for a minute. So it's interesting, Dr. Leo saying such kind things. It's for me, it's been a real journey understanding the economy. And each 3 or 6 months, I kind of have a new theme that I introduce. It usually gets picked up in the public eye, things we're talking about. I did not understand. One of the reasons I made the effort was when I first came. Leo, where's Leo? Sorry. When I first went last year to Nabf, was it April? September of 2017?
Yes.
Last year.
2018.
It wasn't September. Was it only September? Yeah, so it was really the first time that I had been, because I live in Nigeria, I don't go out that often, I really did not understand the power of the diaspora. And when I went to the NAFSA conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, it was an incredible eye-opener for me. And the MDG was there and gave, I'm sure you're going to speak again today, it'll be magnificent. And subsequently, a little later in October, I went to Paris and I spoke at an event called Spotlight Nigeria in Paris. And there were a lot of diaspora, French diaspora. And it got me thinking about all this and doing the mathematics. So there's something that is repeated all the time that says we're an oil economy. And we've been saying for years that we're not an oil economy. How can we be an oil economy? Because we produce 800 million barrels of oil a day. We have almost 200 million people. Half of the value goes to the IOC or lifting cost or something. So the value to Nigerian people is 2 barrels of oil per year, per person. Oil's $50 a barrel, so that's $100. So if that's your foundation for the economy, you are guaranteed that we're going to be poor forever, right? But I didn't have an alternative to it. So then, through all of this diaspora, then the World Bank came out, and I should have read these numbers before, but they came out with new numbers, and they said that actually remittances into Nigeria are $22 billion. Well, that's bigger than the oil money already. And then, of course, the remittances that the World Bank gets are just official remittances. So let me ask you the following question. How many of you, when you fly to Nigeria, take a few iPhones for your nieces and nephews, like tucked away, right? Or other things, right? That's an unofficial remittance. You went out and used US dollars or pounds or wherever you came from and took it into Nigeria and gave it to them, right? So it doesn't get picked up by it doesn't get picked up. If you ever take, I don't know what happens on the Delta flight, but I am, when I take the BA flight, so I just got married and my wife is moving from London to Lagos, but a lot of times we're going back and forth between London and Lagos. I was always happy because I was buying these economy class tickets and sitting in the back, that was fun, I didn't mind that. But I didn't ever want to check luggage in, right? So I was very happy to always have enough status that I could get on first. Because if you didn't get on first, because Nigerians carry so much stuff. And I'm talking about the BA. So the BA staff would, they told me that plane has the most luggage per passenger of any route. So that's all unofficial remittances, people buying things coming in. But even more than that, so I have a very simple economic life. I make as much money as I can and I send it to my ex-wife. So one day I said, I have lots of Naira, do you want them? And for some reason she said that was not acceptable. So of course I have to find dollars or pounds. And, but I never use the bank. I use the Boki system, right? So everyone understands, I hope you understand with the Boki system. That no, I know you understand the system, but you understand that no money moves across the border. Like you think about what's happened here, right? So I'm Canadian, if you have someone Canadian, diaspora wants to send money back home. You have someone else in Nigeria that sent their child to university in Canada. The Boki's matching it all up. There's no fees. The spreads are very tight. But no money's moved the border. So that doesn't get captured in the official. In fact, I don't even know why anyone used the Western Union. I mean, it's just such a rip-off on that. So. But the net result is that the official remittances are 22 billion. The unofficial ones, AFDB says for Africa as a whole, are at least half of the official. But I think for Nigeria, they're bigger than half. I don't know the number. This year, I've set myself a task, the team, we're going to figure this out, we're going to start to, we're talking about it, we need to write more facts. But the net result is, let's say that the amount is $35 billion, and all of you are contributing to that. That's what's holding the economy up. I think it's not too much to say that the Nigerian economy and society would be insolvent without the diaspora. So please give yourself a big hand for the fact. So you think that you're maybe not doing enough, but the whole place would basically collapse. Now, why have we not paid much attention to it in Nigeria? Well, is the diaspora special assistant here?
But she didn't make a decision.
Tomorrow. She's coming.
She still didn't come.
She's coming tomorrow.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I'd love to have her come and talk more about this because one of the, I'm sure all of you are aware, the government in Nigeria, and that would just sort of shown it's the most important resource the country would be. It pays so much attention to oil, and yet there's a lot more economic activity coming about from the diaspora. So why not pay attention to the diaspora? Well, I think one reason, I'm just speculating, but one reason is the oil proceeds the government can capture. Right? It comes to Abuja and expensive ways, and we can have long discussions about whether it's helpful or not helpful. But the diaspora remittances get right to the people. They get to you, and of course every one of you are very successful, but you all have obligations and relatives in places that are not so successful through no fault of their own on that, and may not have, didn't have the opportunities. And I'm sure you're supporting them. So this support comes into the country, and it effectively keeps it afloat. And of course, when we say our GDP per capita is so low, it doesn't capture these remittances. We're a little bit richer in that sense on that. But the implication of all of this is that how can we make sorry, let me just touch on one other point before we come back. So I don't know how many of you follow closely Nigerian politics. But one of the many problems we could talk about, but one of the problems is a belief in Nigeria that the federal government can solve Nigeria's challenges. Now, there's lots of reasons that's wrong. But one reason it's wrong is it's astonishing how small the government is.
Yes.
So if you take, so the economy in Nigeria, when we talk in Naira terms, is roughly 130 trillion Naira. The federal budget is 7 trillion Naira. I don't know how much trillion, maybe half a trillion of it goes just to pay for the Senate and all of the political costs, and et cetera. There is effectively, the government has no money. It has no money. And one of the things we become more critical about is the government multiplies these intervention programs, low interest loans, SMEs, agric. But the reality is, when you hear the number, it sounds large because it's several billion. But given the scale of what you need to do in Nigeria, the government has no impact. NERSL, these intervention programs, etc. So then you say, well, what's going to have an impact? Well, the only thing that can have an impact is the private sector on that, and the level of investment coming from the private sector. And it's amazing to me every day, people ask me why I stay. There are lots of reasons I stay, but one thing that inspires me is every day I run into private sector people who are trying to do incredible things despite all the challenges. And of course, I have one client, obviously get named, but they're trying to build an agricultural supply new thing, and then they realized they had to build the whole chain out, back and front, et cetera. Their investment's up to $80 million. It's a large entrepreneur in Nigeria. But he's prepared to step up and do that. Mr. Dangote is prepared to put 650,000 barrel, 650,000 barrel per day refining plant up, $20 billion, a lot of it is own money. So there are people prepared to do big things in the private sector despite the challenges. And we need that because to be wealthier in Nigeria, we need a private sector over the next 10 years. We say, not that we have any science on it, we say it needs to be 10 to 15 times bigger than the private sector today. And I think a lot of people in the private sector recognize this, but it has not sunk through necessarily to the government, how small the government is and how their interventions in trying to, whether it's power, whether it's agri, whether it's SME sector, IT, their interventions are not big enough. Only the private sector can do this. So then we go back and we say, what's the role for the diaspora on this? Well, the diaspora, they said they're putting $35 billion into the country. And a lot of that is going into current consumption. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You all have relatives and other obligations. People need to eat. They need to have some small comfort. You're all contributing to that, on that. But the diaspora needs to find an organized way to invest in Nigeria. And I'm sure some of you, I know some of you have tried in your village or your community to try to run a business or invest in a business from abroad, but it's not simple as an individual. You don't have the control, you don't necessarily have the full resources yourself to build something at sufficient scale, because as I said, what tends to happen is you realize you need to control more and more and more of the business systems of projects. The big players are going to have to be big to be able to accomplish that. So what I would like to challenge you today is you're the richest diaspora, the American diaspora. Last year, Leo, who is the woman from the FDA who spoke at NAFSA? For FDA. So there was a woman when we were at this conference in Charlotte.
That's right.
Sorry, what's her name?
I forgot them.
But you know her, right?
Yes, I know her very well.
So I sat with her on the bus when we were going to the party afterwards, and she told me about all of her siblings. So she had 9 or 10 siblings, and they'd all been to top universities, and lawyers, and doctors, and business, and it was just unbelievable to me. I mean, the reality is... Sorry?
Mezzo was in there.
Yes. So the reality is Nigeria has probably, it's hard to measure these things, but among the strongest diaspora the world has ever seen, right? So you think about how powerful diaspora. So perhaps the strongest ever is Israel. Regardless of what you think politically of that, if you think about the formation of Israel in the Second World War, for obvious reasons, Jews around the world supported Israel very strongly at that time on that. The Indian diaspora has been fantastic, and India really uses it as a strategic resource. But I read somewhere that in the United States, of ethnic groups, Nigerians are the most educated, right? So I think you have a claim to have the strongest diaspora. And the question is, the number I've seen is 15 million diaspora. 15 million. Now, not everyone of that 15 million is well educated, but I'm sure there's 8 to 10 million of you educated, contributing to your societies, whether it's the UK, Canada, Australia, newer countries, as I said, Germany, I'm finding out, Netherlands, France, so 8 to 10 million, and of course are giving us $35 billion dollars into the country. So how do we organize the diaspora to take its place? Because I don't think Nigeria is going to get to where it needs to go unless this group of 8 to 10 million people become active in a very organized way. And of course, you can't vote. Why can't you vote? Well, I don't know if there's any press here, but I suspect I don't even know if this is formed in politicians' heads, but I'm sure in the back of their minds they kind of realize if 8 to 10 million educated diaspora could vote, it would change the entire political system. The parties don't want that. But short of getting the vote, at least in the short term, the thing that excites me is how do we harness this energy in the United States and in Canada? We have Canadian here, right?
Britain.
From the Canadian Nigeria.
There is Canadian, there's British.
But how do we harness the diaspora to give people a way of investing in Nigeria in a more structured way, and then also tap their individual talents, whether it's in the health field, or whether it's in IT, whether it's in energy, all of these things in Nigeria need. So it's not just money, but it's also expertise. How do we tap that to make a difference? And one thing I've started to think about in the past few months, and I will start to write about, but I think a kind of radical thought for me is, I grew up in a society where you had a lot of faith in the government. Not that we necessarily have a big government in Canada. Actually, most things, and I write about this in Nigeria, most things that matter in Canada happen at the provincial and local level. The federal government does very little, up until including resources. So in Canada, the resources are controlled by the province, completely. The federal government has nothing to do with it. They get income tax and people on that, but the province decided it's worked well for us. I've written about this in Nigeria, where we have the opposite system. But I'm coming to the conclusion with Nigeria, it is something very powerful about being organized, self-organized. Because we can't rely on the government, particularly the federal government, in most of the states, actually Nigerians are not people outside sometimes, and sometimes ourselves, we say, oh, Nigerians are very disorganized. But in fact, Nigerians are very organized. I'm particularly impressed that some of the groups I run into are these professional bodies, like the Chartered Institute of Bankers, Federal Reporting Council, all of these professional bodies, any of you that are involved in them in Nigeria realize how organized they are. But there's no central body doing this. This is self-organization. The Igbo apprenticeship system is self-organization. Every market has rules, and people in the market pay what they need to pay to the market, and that's, for them, it's effectively a tax. But people are, they're 100% guaranteed to pay that in the part of the market. They're not 100% to pay their tax on that. So you see in Nigeria all of these self-organizing mechanisms by private actors, and that's really, when you see positive things, it's usually coming from those sorts of groups on that. So the question is, how do we get that same dynamic going with the diaspora? There's no higher authority telling you to do this. You want to do it on that. And how do you galvanize yourselves and pull together a structure that the diaspora can make this difference? Because I genuinely believe if you got organized, you would drive the development. So I came back. I said earlier that we were short capital. Just to put some numbers on it. Let me put it in dollar terms. So if we need investment of about 27, 28% of GDP, let's roughly call that $100 billion, and we're only getting $50 billion. So we have a $50 billion a year gap. We think that in domestic resources, I mentioned that, say a word about it. We can't unlock domestic resources, and the biggest domestic resource we can unlock is real estate. So there's a term in development economics called dead capital, not debt, dead, like D-E, like dead. Right? So dead capital is when you have an asset that you can't do anything with, right? And in Nigeria, because of the Land Use Act, we have dead real estate. Real estate is the biggest asset. So we can unlock that, and there are a lot of people talking about this, including a number of the presidential candidates about it. So we have more capital in Nigeria if we do it properly, but we still need the outside capital. And from the diaspora, I mean, I challenge if we could put $35 billion under today's structure. Could we put in another $5 to $10 billion if we had a more organized structure that was not for consumption, but was for investment? So I'll leave you with that thought. I think that's the challenge. This is a fantastic conference. So delighted to meet all of you. As I said, to see old friends, see some new friends. And God bless Nigeria. Thank you very much.
NABN TV, inspiring a new generation.